And we're going to go ahead and start with the roll call. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Matthey. Councilmember Matthey. Councilmember Bolin.
Here.
Councilmember Milawambwe.
Here.
Councilmember Emig.
Present.
Councilmember Painter.
Here.
Councilmember Carrillo.
Here.
Councilmember Black.
Here.
Councilmember Crable.
Here.
Councilmember Bray.
Here.
Councilmember Matthey. Mayor Renner.
Here. Thank you very much. We do have a quorum. Do we have, we'll start with, with our COVID update by the city manager. Mr. Gleason, do you want to give us a quick COVID update, please?
Yes, I will, Mayor. Wanted to comment that the 80A reviews at City Desk. Wow, I think I need to start over. All right. The 80A review that city staff are performing, an update on that. We've completed the downtown, Public Works, Community Development, are working with some of the downtown businesses. And then now we're expanding this as a citywide project and review, which was the plan all along. Real quick, an update on the COVID Resident Assistance Program. 182 total applications received, 106 referrals, 358 walk-ups at the arena window, and 171 phone calls. And then we have 2 that have been approved, but we're still working on the final dollar amounts. That's my update on COVID, Mayor.
Thank you very much. At this point, then, we're going to go to our public comment section. Madam Clerk, are there people who've called in for public comment?
Thank you, Mayor. There was one individual who had registered, Zachary Gittrich, but he has not called in today. So I'll just document his name for the record, and no one emailed public comment.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to go ahead and go to our consent agenda. The only action items, of course, at a committee of the whole meeting would involve minutes of each of these previous meetings, and they include May 18th, May 26th, and June 8th, 2020. I'm going to ask to see if this is not, oh, I'm sorry, Madam Clerk, do I have to do them individually?
You don't, but I actually do have a question or a statement to make. There's a couple of corrections that I wanted to discuss, if that's okay, before asking for the motion.
Yes, please.
All right. In our June 8th minutes, on page 2 of the minutes, which appears as page 29 of today's packet, Councilmember Matthey, underneath his COVID update, I need to correct the statement that he made regarding the number that the city could potentially lose if a citizen went without completing the census. And let me just pull up here. In the minutes itself, the sentence read that the city could be out $170,000 over the course of 10 years, and that number should actually be 17,000. There's an extra zero in there, so I will make sure to get that corrected. And then lastly, there is another one that on the May 26th minutes, that Council Member Crable brought to our attention under item 8H, the board that Council Member Crable is a part of that was receiving the CDBG grant, which he recused himself from, is actually Heartland Head Start. So if you could please ask for a motion to include those amendments, that would be great. Thank you.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, so just to clarify, Councilmember Bolin, you're making the motion to approve the minutes of the 18th, 18th of May, 26th of May, 8th of June as amended.
Correct.
And I'll second that since I'm the one who threw out some wrong numbers, Mayor.
Okay, Councilmember Matthey, good to see you. And let's make sure that we have that down on the record that he is attending, because he couldn't be here to second this if he weren't in attendance. At this point, Madam Clerk, would you call the roll? I don't see any hands up, so.
Thank you. Councilmember Matthey.
Yes.
Councilmember Bolin.
Yes.
Councilmember Milawambwe,
Yes.
Councilmember Emig,
Yes.
Councilmember Painter,
Yes.
Councilmember Carrillo,
Yes.
Councilmember Black,
Yes.
Councilmember Crable,
Yes.
Councilmember Bray.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Motion carries. No nays to announce, Madam Clerk. At this point, we have several riveting presentations. And the very first one is 6A, presentation and discussion of the proposed water infrastructure master plan. Talk about exciting reality TV as requested by the Public Works Department. Now, there's obviously, in none of these are there motions, but there's a presentation and then some council discussion. We're going to go ahead and start. I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Gleason, and then you can go ahead and lead this off to our senior project manager. Mr. Gleason.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is the public follow-up to the discussions that we've been having in the past. Tonight, there'll be a presentation from our consultant, and then with the full intention that this will be an agenda item to approve the water master plan at next week's council meeting. I'm going to turn it over for opening comments to Kevin Cothe, our Public Works Director. Kevin.
Thank you, City Manager Gleason, and thank you, Mayor and Council, for the opportunity tonight to present this master plan, a very brief overview, high-level overview of a 400-page document that outlines what we need to do for basically the next 20 years to improve and upgrade and keep bringing safe drinking water to our citizens. And so our consultant who helped put all this information together is here tonight to present this to us. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Amaru.
Thank you, Kevin, and good evening, Mayor and Council, and thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be here with you tonight, although virtually. I hope to give you kind of a brief overview of the water infrastructure master plan, and would be happy at the end to take any questions or comments from you. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let me know when you're able to see that.
We got it.
Perfect. So hopefully everyone can see the PowerPoint slides. Again, thank you very much for the opportunity. CDM Smith has been working with the Water Department and the Public Works Water Division for the last almost 2 years on this water infrastructure master plan. I do want to acknowledge the staff of the water system that have been working with us on this project. A number of site visits, a lot of investigations, a lot of hard work went into this. So very much appreciate their hard work and their teamwork on this, as well as the opportunity to be here with you tonight. So I'm going to go over the slides. If at any given point anyone's having a hard time hearing me or can't quite see, if I'm going too fast with the slides, please don't be afraid to holler, and I'll be I can move back a slide if needed. So in terms of the agenda for tonight, we want to give you an overview of the goals and objectives of this water infrastructure master plan, and then talk about the 4 main components of the infrastructure master plan, which looked at water demand forecasting, regulatory review, the water system conditions assessment and the recommendations, and then the distribution system evaluation and recommendations, sort of the underground piping that we don't get to see day to day, but they are a very important and integral part to supplying safe, reliable drinking water to the citizens of the city of Bloomington. And then the summary of the water infrastructure master plan. As I said before, we'll be happy to wrap up with some questions. So what were the goals for this water infrastructure master plan? First, we wanted to make sure that there's enough water to meet the projected needs for the city. We wanted to make sure that the city maintained its compliance with not only current regulations, but as well as potential future regulations that are going to be impacting the water system, continue to improve and optimize the resiliency of the system, understand and prioritize the needs of the water system, and finally develop a capital plan for the water system with the projected cost for the different improvements. So what you see here up on the screen is the 4 main components of the water infrastructure master plan: supply and demand analysis, both on the surface water as well as the groundwater. Regulations. We know nitrates has been a concern for the city for quite some time. We wanted to make sure the city can maintain its compliance with regulations. And then the facilities condition assessment. This is looking at the water treatment plant, the pumping stations, as well as the tanks. And then finally, the distribution system. Again, this is the underground piping that carry this water from the treatment plant and the pump stations out to our homes and businesses. So it's very important that those pipes are replaced before they fail to avoid any catastrophic failure. Part of that is looking at the hydraulics of the system and the needs in terms of how much water we need to store over at our tanks and reservoirs. So starting with demand forecasting, we went back, and actually this is just a snapshot of the last 10 years or so of demand data. And when doing demand forecasting, it's important to separate residential, which is shown in blue, versus gray, which is commercial, and then green is wholesale, and finally industrial is blue, dark blue. And as you can see, generally speaking, over the last 10 years, winter demands, avoiding kind of not looking necessarily at summer peaks, which are more impacted by weather patterns. Winter demand tell us kind of a fixed demand. You can see it's relatively steady over the last 10 years. You can see a decline in commercial, and both the industrial and the wholesale is relatively flat. So this kind of gives us a sense of historically what's been happening in terms of the water needs. Then we looked at the population projection, both by the Regional Planning Council as well as the city. We looked at population projections over the next 20 years, looking out to the year 2040. Looked at 3 growth curves, kind of an aggressive or a growth trend, high growth trend, an economic development, something more realistic based on what we see, as well as a slow growth over the 20 years. And you can see this is the number that we're going to be referring to. It's about 12.5 MGD, the average day demand that we're projecting for the year 2040 versus kind of where we are historically at about 10.4. So that's kind of a modest growth curve, which is representative of what we see in most of the other Midwestern communities in the area. And on a max day demand, this is on a hot summer day, such as what we experienced, not necessarily over the weekend because we did get some rain, but you do want to factor in some peaking factor. And historically, even though that number is 1.4, we did elect to go with a slightly more conservative peaking factor. And if you take the 12.5 roughly by 1.7, you get approximately 21 MGD is what we're projecting the max day demand to be for the system. I do want to go back roughly to just the 12.5 because that's the number we're going to see here that tells us whether we have enough water spread over the course of a year. So that's again the 12.5 that we're projecting for the year 2040 for average day demand. We usually compare 125% of that number to the available supply. And what you can see without adding additional groundwater wells, we would have a hard time meeting this roughly 15.6 MGD, which is again, this 12.5 with a 25% safety factor. So you can see in green, we've got Lake Bloomington, light blue, Evergreen Lake. We do need to add additional wells to be able to meet the needs of the system. So that's part of improvement number 1. Then we move into regulatory requirements, and the big challenge for the city that we see from Lake Bloomington is the nitrate levels. You have had some exceedances from that lake above what the Environmental Protection Agency set out as a maximum contaminant limit of 10 milligrams per liter. We have no reason to suspect that that limit is going down. We have no reason to suspect that it's going to go up. It's staying at 10. And so as the city blends with Evergreen Lake, there are additional challenges with being able to consistently be in compliance with that nitrate level. So therefore, blending that water with groundwater would not only help the city meet its supply needs over the next 20 years, but also allow the city to maintain its compliance with the nitrate levels. However, one challenge is that the groundwater, those wells do have radium, and we do need to address those. In addition, there are new revisions to the lead and copper rule that are anticipated to be released at the end of this year. And anytime you blend different sources of water, and there are the presence of lead scales in pipes, that those could release lead. And so we need to evaluate that. So we looked at 5 treatment methods for removing, for blending the 2 sources and maintaining compliance with nitrate as well as the radium. I won't go through these in detail, but one of the options essentially to treat this nitrate with ion exchange, blending the 2 waters either at the head of the plant or at the end of the plant, and then blending after treatment, and then finally modifying the treatment process to include biological denitrification to essentially remove the nitrate. What you see here in the schematic is the city's treatment process. It's a conventional lime softening plant. You do an excellent job at the treatment plant. The staff are doing an excellent job maintaining its compliance with regulatory requirements, plus removing hardness. The nice thing about this treatment process with the lime softening is that when we start introducing the wells that do have radium, that treatment process, the lime softening, does remove radium. So that radium actually precipitates out and is in the solids. And by blending the wells with the 2 lakes, you're bringing down the level of nitrates going through the treatment plant, and therefore ensuring and maintaining that compliance with both the nitrate as well as the wells. So what you see here is the additional wells are not only from a supply perspective, but also from a water quality perspective, that you see here approximately $10 million. There are approximately another $1 million in miscellaneous water quality improvements. The next task, or the next phase of this, or the third pillar of this water infrastructure plan, is a conditions assessment. This is an aerial of the water treatment plant. A lot of facilities, a lot of equipment, a lot of systems that have been there for quite some time. In addition to this, we visited all the other pumping stations and storage tanks. This included a multidiscipline team of structural, electrical, architectural, HVAC, plumbing, mechanical, process, civil, essentially all the different engineering teams to go into all these facilities and do a comprehensive condition assessment and identify equipment and systems that are at near the end of their useful life and do need to be replaced. We also did dive inspections of reservoirs that could not be removed from service. So we had structural divers go into the reservoirs at Division Street. And we also did pump performance testing to compare the performance of pumps to when they were purchased brand new and see if there's decline in capacity and efficiency over time. Based on that, we developed a list of projects and a rating class and prioritization for all the different systems. What you see here up on the screen, just some of the photos of some of the existing facilities, and a couple of things just to draw your attention to. What you see here on the right, this is the existing Lake Bloomington raw water pump station. In addition to being near the end of its useful life in terms of condition, new modern pump stations have to comply with what we call the Hydraulic Institute or HI standards in terms of the spacing on the suction side of the pump as well as the discharge of the pump. And not maintaining that compliance with these requirements means these pumps could potentially be out of warranty as well as more wear and tear. So this is just an example of one of the components that does need to be replaced with something that does comply with industry standards, as well as something that would replace this pump station that's past its useful life. There are a number of electrical components where parts are difficult to identify. They've also passed their useful life. What you see here at the Enterprise Pumping Station, again, number of pumps and systems that have near the end of their useful life, and it's important to start to plan for these replacements to avoid a catastrophic failure where one of these systems would fail and you no longer have the ability to bring water into the treatment plant or continue to maintain compliance with regulations. So out of that condition assessment of all the different facilities, we came up with a different set of projects at the treatment plant, electrical systems at the treatment plant, chemical and hydraulic improvements at the treatment plant, as well as improvements at the different pumping stations. And collectively, this was approximately $79 million of improvements to address the condition, the age of these systems, but as well as safety and reliability and security of all these different systems that have served the city well over the years. It's just time, just like everything else, these facilities are at the end of their useful life, and it's time to plan for the replacements. And the last component of the water infrastructure master plan is the distribution system. These are the pipes that are underground that we don't necessarily see, but when the water is not available at the tap, or we drive on a street and we see sometimes water gushing out of the ground, those are the pipes that very critical to the water system, but oftentimes can be forgotten, unfortunately. So what you see here is a map of all the water main breaks that have occurred within the city, and they're basically the spread pretty much throughout the city. And on the bar chart here on the right, on the y-axis, these are the number of water main breaks for every 100 miles of pipe. The city has approximately 450 miles of pipe. And the industry standard is usually you want to be less than this 15 breaks per 100 miles. And typically also the industry wants to see a declining average, meaning they want to see you're trending in the right direction. If you start out at 18, you want to go down and down. And what we see here is over a number of years, including the 2018 data, we can see that you've approached the 20 breaks per 100 miles. And again, these are older pipes and they've served the city well over the years. It's just, it's time for replacement. In addition to main breaks, which obviously not only a disruption in service, not only can cause damage to property and flooding, there are other criteria that we need to make sure that the distribution system can provide. One of them is adequate pressure. The city set out a goal of 35 PSI. We also set out a goal for fire flow depending on the zone and the area that's serving. And this was reviewed with the fire chief, either 500 gallons per minute of fire flow or 1,000. And then also addressing this water age. Water age can sometimes impact the chlorine residual and the health and the quality of the water. So we want to continue to monitor the water quality as it moves throughout the distribution system and maintain that excellent chlorine residual that is required by regulations. So the first is how do we address the fire flow? There's obviously not only an insurance issue, but it's a safety issue. The good news is that there's only a handful of water mains that do need to be upsized to meet fire flow requirements, either the 500 or the 1,000. And that number is about $3 million in fire flow improvements. And then in terms of the replacement program based on a prioritization, we look at both the probability of failure and the consequence of failure for every single piece of pipe within the water system. So probability of failure is derived from the age of the pipe, how many breaks have occurred on the pipe, the material of the pipe, is it in corrosive soil, anything that can tell us the condition of that pipe. The consequence of the pipe tells us what happens if that piece of pipe fails. Is it critical to a critical customer? Is it going to cause damage? Does it require a long time to repair because it's in a difficult area to access? So when we went through this prioritization process with city staff, we wanted to make sure that we're balancing both of these critical pieces to define the risk of a piece of pipe failing. Now, the good news is most of the pipes in the system are either at negligible or low risk, but it's still approximately 7% or so of the system is a moderate, high, or extreme high risk. that do need to be replaced over time. And again, nothing necessarily wrong. It's just a matter of these pipes don't last forever, and you know, we just need to make sure that the city is caught up in terms of a water main replacement program. And so based on approximately the 4 miles in extreme risk, 7 miles in high risk, 21 miles of moderate or medium risk, we've come up with estimated capital that's needed to replace these pipes, and collectively with the $3 million in fire flow improvements to upsize mains to meet the fire flow criteria, we're looking at approximately $53 million of water mains and pipes that either need to be upsized or replaced to maintain compliance and to continue to provide the safe, reliable drinking water. So in summary, what you see on this table is the sum of all the different improvements. We start out with the regulatory, and this is again driven by the additional wells that are needed to maintain compliance with the nitrate. The facilities improvements, 79 million, that's largely upgrading and rehabbing and replacing facilities that are at the end of their useful life. This is what I just recently went over with the distribution system improvements, another $53 million. And again, this includes both the high risk, extreme high and medium risk pipes, as well as the fire flow. And then anytime you look at a water infrastructure plan of this size, you need to add staff and services to oversee these improvements and to implement them. We're estimating that to be approximately $9 million. And it's important that we consider ways to reduce non-revenue water and smart technologies to operate and maintain the system. So collectively, that totals $172 million of water system improvements to be implemented over the next 20 years. So I apologize if I went through this information fast. I would be happy to take any questions or any questions from the group. Thank you again very much for your time.
Great, thank you very much. So our discussion question period amongst council members, and I start with Councilmember Matthew and then Councilmember Craviel. I see their hands up. Councilmember Matthew.
Thanks, Mayor. I was curious, when was the last time that we did a study like this, where we did a complete system review and created new priorities? Because I don't remember this. We've been talking about doing this one for years, but when was the last time prior to this that this complete picture of the entire system was done? Does anybody remember?
Anybody remember?
Yeah, with us tonight, besides myself, is the Assistant Director of Public Works, Bob Yale. Bob might have some recollection of when that was. Bob?
Excuse me, Bob is always better with the notes in front of him that give him the clue to that. And it's in my pile. I apologize. It has been a number of years. It has been, I'm going to say, going on 20 years since we've had such a comprehensive assessment, such as Amru walked you through today. We have other master plans in the period time frame since then, but they've been more specific and focused on parts of the system. When I went to the water department at that time, so before it came to the water division, we had lots of different pieces and parts that were merging together, trying to figure out the priorities. And so one of the things staff and I determined was we have a lot of pieces and parts and reports and master plans that are old, some out of date, some didn't complement, or even some are in opposition to each other. So to answer your question, it's been a long time, shorter time frame for some of the pieces and parts, but quite extensively a long time since we've done a full-scale plan.
Okay, that's a good answer, Bob. Thank you. I'm just curious. Let's see, what's the best way to say this? So we get these very well put together recommendations. So thank you for all that to CDM Smith and the staff for putting all this together. I know this was a ton of work. We do, let's say, for instance, we put in all this into plan and we get this all going. Is this we're good for 20 more years from now? We're good for 40 years from now? I mean, what's a is there a way to ballpark, like, it seems like generational decisions we're making right here, or we're going to be making here, but is it one generation, 2 generations? Just any ideas on that one? I know that's a hard question.
I'm going to let me start in there, and then you can follow behind if you want to give some more industry guidelines. But this is a 20-year plan. It's intended to carry us through for 20 years. That's not to say that we won't have to revisit or revise or relook at our system for 20 years. It's a constant review process. We anticipate probably in about 10 years, we would like to go through and do another master plan to see where we are. It's not one you sit, you use, and you walk away. So though we'll use it, we do anticipate needing to update it in a shorter term than the last time we did this.
Perfect. That's exactly what I need to know. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Crable.
Thank you for the presentation, Amaru. I just had a question on the cost. So just some of these things that, that you're proposing, we may not do for another 10 years, right? And so how does the cost now impact what the cost could be down the road? How are we factoring that in?
Amaru?
Sure, and that's an excellent question. It's a question that I get often from council members. The costs that you see are presented as of the date of the master plan. So yeah, in 10 years, unfortunately, if you were to say, we're not going to do anything for 10 years, let's pop open this master plan, those costs are going to be adjusted based on the, what we refer to in our industry, the ENR index, and need to be inflated based on those costs. So yeah, they are in today's dollars and would need to be adjusted if to the year that if that's in 10 years or 20 years, hopefully not, but they're not future cost beyond today.
Thank you.
Great.
I'm going to go to Councilmember Bray in a second, but I just wanted to ask, would it be fair to summarize this overall process is that we're going to continue to monitor, as a city our age from 1850, older sewer lines, newer sewer lines, others that may have been more vulnerable, less vulnerable than others. And so this is a constant process of monitoring and a constant process of fixing. Is that a fair assessment? Amaru?
It is. The infrastructure ages differently. Just because you have a sewer or water main that's 100 years old and one that's say 50 years old, doesn't mean the 50-year-old one isn't in worse shape than the 100-year. And so it is a constant process of reassessing conditions. As Amaru showed, the water main breaks over the years. We track that in the GIS now, so we can see, okay, we have an instance, for instance, in a part of the city that might be related to corrosive soils or perhaps a certain type of pipe material that was used in a certain area. We can narrow that down and target some infrastructure that might need attention, even though it might be newer infrastructure. So we are constantly evaluating that as we move forward. And as Mr. El referenced, we need to reassess where we're at in 10 years and so forth and make sure that we're compliant with current regulations and all that factors in as we move forward. But this master plan really gives us a good guidebook of where we need to be looking for the next 20 years, basically, for what we need to get done.
Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate that very much. Councilmember Bray and then Milawambwe.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for this presentation this evening. It certainly helps us to focus on the issue at hand of delivery of safe and fresh water to our community, which is a fundamental situation for our public health and safety. So I had a question in regards to the revenue water losses. The last slide that was shared had, I believe it was a $20 million figure about, it seemed to me to be focusing on reducing non-water revenue sources. And I guess that means losses. Can you explain what is encompassed in that number and if we can affect that now?
Can I jump in there and start off with that? And then I'll let Kevin Amaru jump in as well. So I think there's a lot more rolled into that $20 million at the bottom end of that last slide than would fit on that slide. So let me back up a second, then I'll answer your question. Within that 20 million, there's also programs and processes that we did not ask CDM Smith to look at. So our water meter replacement program, our watershed improvement program, and a number of those things that have high dollar amounts to them, but were not included in the scope of the master plan per se. We as staff chose to do those separately. We had some expertise and some other consultants working on those. So some of that $20 million is rolled in from the rest of the things that need to be put together in our capital improvement plan and financial plan. So just wanted to clarify that. And as far as our non-revenue water, we are doing things to address that now. We just see that there's opportunities to do improvements to focus on it. Some things we do, we go through the city's distribution system a quarter of the 450 miles every year and do a leak assessment. So we hire a consultant that comes in and listens to our system to try to find some larger leaks to eliminate those. We are also in the middle of the beginning stages of putting in some additional metering. So we're adding some meters at the water treatment plant just south of the plant so we can accurately determine how much water is actually being produced and pumped into town. That'll allow us to better compare to what is actually being sold and give us that more non-revenue water specific number that in some cases is a little bit of an estimate at this point. We also will continue with that program to add some zone metering so we can differentiate what goes into a zone and what gets used in a zone to allow us to focus in to maybe some additional locations where we're losing more water. The water main break map does give us an idea of where some of those are at, but we're just drilling down a little bit at a time. There's some advanced technologies out there that are just coming into the market. We're looking to see how we deploy those to get more accurate measurements to determine where we should focus our efforts.
Thank you very much. Does that clarify things?
Thank you. I appreciate that breakdown.
Great. Councilmember Milwaukee.
Hey, thank you very much. Thank you, Amro, for a great presentation. And also, I'd like to thank the staff for working together with him to put this together. One of the things that I think is important to emphasize is the level of seriousness with which the city plans for many of these things, because you would have in other communities where people do not plan out this far. So I think it is very impressive, for us to be able to plan for 20 years down the road and to actually be concerned about what would happen 20 years down the road, I think is amazing. So I want to commend you all for doing a great job with that. I did note on one of the slides, I think it was the slide about water supply and demand. There was a reference to wholesale as opposed to residential and commercial. And, this is the first that I've heard of wholesale. So I just wanted to get some clarification on that and what that entails.
Kevin or somebody want to take that? Oh, Bob.
I'll start, and Kevin Amru can jump in. So that graph that he showed had a number of different lines on it, and specifically you're asking about wholesale. What we put in the category as wholesale is there's a number of entities that we sell water to that then they turn around and resell that water. And so particularly we sell water to the village of Hudson, the village of Towanda, the Bloomington Township has a couple of meters that purchases water from us. And then technically we sell water to a number of mobile home parks that resell now their own water supply companies as well. So those types of entities are within that line that you reference as wholesale.
Okay. All right, that's right. And that wouldn't include, for example, a place like a Broman or Rivian.
No, those would not in the wholesale. Wholesale is an entity that purchases it from us and then turns around and resells it to their customers. So the village of Hudson buys it in bulk, so to speak, and then meters it out individually to the homes. And so they pay us the rate for what we sell it as in wholesale, and they turn around. Rivian and Growmark or Firestone and those, we put those in the industrial or commercial categories. And if you notice, there was a dark blue line at the bottom of that graph that a couple years ago, it kind of drops off to nothing. That is representative of when Mitsubishi shut down. So you can easily see the Rivian would filter into that direct category nowadays, but we lost a significant amount of revenue and use from Mitsubishi when they left town.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At this point, we have just about 6 minutes left, but we do have Councilmember Carrillo and Emig. If we don't have anybody else, we should be under budget. But just FYI, I may be looking for an extension of this conversation if necessary. Councilmember Carrillo and then Emig.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the presentation. That's really, really helpful. As we are talking about making plans and investments towards the next 20 years, which I think the gravity of that is sinking on with me, I want to try to understand how we're approaching this through an equity lens in a way that addresses historic and structural disinvestment, particularly in communities of color and low-income communities. So, how are we incorporating equity into our planning for the future in terms of water?
Somebody want to take that, Bob, or
Take a starting point at it and somebody can add in. I guess we feel that we're providing the same level of service, I'll start with that, to everyone in our community. All of our customers are our citizens. We looked at the production, the pressures, the volumes across the board, meeting regulatory standards. We have an opportunity when we look towards the future and the rates and looking towards that as a next step to making sure that we can address that a little bit more dramatically in the context or lens of, I think, what you're talking about. But somebody else wants to add in that, Kevin or Amru, to see if I'm missing a point that you guys are aware of that helps answer her question.
if I could just clarify that, if that's the case, I mean, I don't mention that, given that that's the case, right? I don't mean it to sound like it was a question, Bob, but that we do, that is our policy now. As we begin to repair some of the older parts of our water system, that in effect is kind of a redistributive, has a net redistributive impact upon the community, because it's not like most of the east side is going to need large amounts of new water systems or water lines anytime soon. Is that a fair statement? I mean, it's mostly going to be our poor or middle income, working poor areas.
I think if Amru was to pull back up the map and show where the higher priority water mains we're at, most of them won't be in our newer subdivisions and newer areas of the community. So in that sense, we are putting investment back towards bringing our infrastructure in some of our older locations up to current standards. And in case if you want to point to that equity piece of part of that, yes, I think that qualify. We want to make sure that everybody gets the same service level. And in some of our older parts of the community, we have some undersized mains for our pressures and our fire flows. And so those focus by default will be in those locations.
Thank you, Bob.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, Councilmember Carrillo.
Yeah, I guess just to clarify, I don't have any evidence that would lead me to believe that the water quality is different depending on who you are. So I guess the question speaks more to rate structures and thinking through how that affects different brackets of our residents differently. And so just want to make sure that does get prioritized, right? That it's not an afterthought, because sometimes it's when we build these systems and aren't thinking about that and have invested millions and millions of dollars that we realize, oh, we should have gone about this a different way. So like I think if we're digging this deep, now is the space and the opportunity for us to be as creative as possible in thinking through that sort of stuff.
If I could clarify that, just Jen, because I'm not totally clear on what you've asked. We have a singular rate structure. I mean, everybody pays the same depending on how much water they use and or what box they check in terms of insurance. So
exactly right. So what I'm saying is, I don't know if any other cities have a different progressive water structure, but yeah, like now is the time to be looking into that and seeing if that's a thing that we might consider building into our system. I don't have the answer. I'm just saying I want us to think about that as we're going through this.
We absolutely will. We'll consider all the industry standard solutions, as well as many different input levels from the council on the call here, as well as the ratepayers and citizens that get to participate through that. There's a lot of unique things that can come out of industry standards, but also a lot of unique things that we that are commonly look at that won't realize it. So it's certainly going to be a focus during those conversations, and I look forward to having those talks with you a little bit further.
Thank you, Bob.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Jen. Councilmember Emig, and if it's you have the floor, Julie. Julie?
You're on mute, Julie.
Okay, now I'm not.
No,
Thank
we
you, Mayor.
Yeah, we-
Thanks for the presentation. Gosh, weeks now, I should get used to this. So I have just one quick question of clarification and then another one having to do with efficiency going forward. So from what I can understand, even by the leak assessment graphic, that in a lot of ways we are above the industry standard in terms of the amount of leaks we have in our infrastructure. And what I'm hearing is that the bulk of our repair work needed is really to upgrade the system, make sure that it's running efficiently and safely, you know, that we're not getting, say, a surge of lead in our water supply, to paint the darkest picture there. And so from what I can tell, what we really need to do is just improve the structure of our water system. And the second question is can you foresee any way to incentivize water use efficiency, which might result in lower costs for all? Like, do we need to use water as much as we do in all the ways we do? And might we build that into a plan for Bloomington's future? Thank you.
Thank you. Any comment? Yeah,
I'll just note, water efficiency and conservation has certainly impacted our daily use and our sale volume of water over the last 10 years. You can see that with the efficient use of our toilets and sinks and otherwise, it has brought that down. It's not to say that it's to a level where it should be. As most of you know, and we're on the council, we implemented a leak protection program about a year ago in May that's been well utilized to help people. And what the data, if you look at that initially, shows is what we've always said is toilets account for the vast majority of our leaks, as well as some other infrastructure. So can we still provide some education to help people use less water for their daily activities? And can we work to incentivize those that are more conservative? Yes, you can. Our current decreasing block rate structure is a little unique. It took into consideration a number of things a while ago. And when we'll look through a multitude of things, and certainly conservation and looking for people to conserve it is appropriate. We'll just have to balance that with making sure that we have the revenue distributed properly to get the projects done that need to be done.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. At this point, we exactly have hit our time, and we certainly appreciate the presentation, and we look forward to acting on this in the future. At this point, we're going to move on to item 6B as in boy, and that is presentation and discussion of the Connect Transit Connect to the Future Working Group. We know that this is long awaited and it's requested by the administration. I'm going to actually turn this over to Mr. Gleason briefly before I think he's going to turn it over to Isaac Thorne. We do have Isaac Thorne, and we have the chair of Connect Transit, Ryan Whitehouse, and Judy Buchanan, who are also on the line that can answer questions or add to this. So I'm going to turn over first to Mr. Gleason.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm going to hand this off right to Isaac Thorne, the General Manager, and to Ryan and Judy eventually. Isaac.
Sounds good. Isaac, you want to go ahead and hit the ground running, dude?
Yeah. So I just want to thank the Mayor and Council for allowing us this opportunity to make this presentation. As I've already stated, joining me tonight is two Bloomington appointees, Chairman Ryan Whitehouse and Trustee Judy Buchanan. Tonight, we're going to be updating Council on our COVID-19 policies and procedures, our Connect to the Future work group recommendations, operation and budget challenges, and then finally, the Downtown Transportation Center site selection study. So I'm going to go ahead and start this presentation. Hopefully this works. I got to share my screen first. Okay, everybody see that?
Yeah.
All right. So I just want to start off by thanking our employees for the incredible work they're doing during the pandemic. The service that we are providing proves beyond a doubt that Connect Transit is an essential service. Our community is relying on transit more than ever. Not everyone uses public transit, but we all rely on essential employees such as grocery clerks, medical staff, and others that do rely on Connect Transit for transportation. All these essential employees are very important to Connect Transit, and they are critical to our community. When the coronavirus hit our area, we instituted policies and procedures to keep our employees and customers safe. We did reduce service because we saw a drastic decrease in ridership, and we wanted to ensure that our employees could take time off if they were sick or if they're caring for family members. And we've been reminding employees, if you are sick, please stay home. We don't want you at work. But this also allows us to free up our operators to clean and disinfect buses. We've been cleaning buses and disinfecting them on regular intervals every 4 hours. Unfortunately, though, this did add about $6,000 in additional cleaning costs per week. We also instituted a passenger limit on fixed route and connectability buses. On fixed route, we limited passengers to 10. And then on connectability, we limited our passengers to 3. We want to ensure that all of our customers are practicing safe physical distancing from one another. That's why we implemented that policy. In combination, we also instituted rear door boarding and suspended fare collections. We wanted to ensure that customers, when getting on the buses, weren't bunching up at the fare box trying to put in their fare or swipe their pass. We wanted to ensure that they were also practicing safe social distancing. And we want them to ensure they're practicing safe social distancing throughout the bus. The driver's area is very, very tight. But we also understand the impact that the reduction of fares or suspension of fares is having on our customers. We know that they're dealing financially, going for hard times during this pandemic. So that's been a great thing for our customers, is reduction or suspension of fares. We're also requiring mask or face covering for all of our employees and customers on the bus. And we're equipping drivers with additional masks to provide to customers that don't have one. We don't want to strand our customers or tell them they can't ride because they don't have a face mask. So we are handing these out to customers, but reminding them that a face mask is required to ride the bus. We're also implementing interior displays and mobile ticketing to complement wayfinding and hands-free ridership. I'll be talking more about these a little later. I just want to take this time to make a public service announcement that Connect Transit is providing transportation service to the COVID-19 testing center. We partner with McLean County Health Department and McLean County EMA to ensure that people that don't have a vehicle have transportation to the testing site. They can take our buses there and they can get off to the walk-up site. So I just want to make the council aware of that, and make residents that may be watching aware that that is available for those that want to get tested. And we encourage you, if you need to get tested, to use that service. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Trustee Judy Buchanan, who is going to talk about the Connect to the Future work group recommendations.
Judy? Judy, I think you got yourself on mute. Judy?
Yep, I think I'm here now. Can you hear me now?
We hear you. Cool.
Thank you, Terry, Mayor. And thanks to all of you. I'm going to speak rather briefly to the Connect to the Future recommendations. I believe you all did receive an executive summary and a report of the recommendations again just recently. And actually, thank you very much, every member of the council who took the time out of all your schedules to sit down with Isaac and myself and walk through those recommendations. I think we had a really good, robust discussion with each one of you, and we've heard you. We've been informed by some of the things that you shared with us as we go forward. I think you understand the charge of this work group was really to engage our community in recognizing the essential role, as Isaac just stated, of Connect Transit and how we want our mobility platform to look going forward. Of course, when we said that initially, no one would have thought going forward would mean trying to advance all the good things that our city has to do in the middle of a pandemic. But among the recommendations, the one rate for all, the board has approved that. The board of trustees has approved that. And when we resume collection, then the board, we're going to be looking at how and when do we institute that. But there will be ample warning, not warning, but notice to all of our riders and potential riders when that does happen, so that we aren't just going to turn off the switch from the no fare to the one rate for all. But that was definitely a topic of significant conversation and discussion among the work group, who incidentally, I think you all know, we had a wonderful group of individuals from throughout our community who did a very outstanding job amidst a lot of challenges and a lot of issues that were not the easiest to come to grips with. But they did a wonderful job, and by consensus approved unanimously the report that was given to you. The expansion of services to the city limits was another very large conversation in the work group. And that really is a work in progress. People that are riders that are wanting to utilize that will need to submit an application and can work with our Connect staff on making that happen. The Better Bus Stops campaign is in process. If you are interested in tracking where we are, what we've done, and some of the timeframes, that is on the Connect Transit website. Our goal is, as you see here, to be complete with this campaign by 2024. As we check in the industry, we are apparently taking one of the more aggressive actions to accomplish that and to make sure that our bus stops are all as convenient and as safe and as accessible as they need to be. The sustaining funding detail, and that's there before you, and I know there have been some specific discussions, and Isaac will be touching upon that. In terms of future action with additional funding, I'm aware that there is discussion of where would we be expanding any fixed routes. Those kind of discussions, we'll be working with the Regional Planning Commission and others as we look at trying to develop some plans and some recommendations, whether or not we can expand. And with that expansion of any fixed route is going to require additional funding. So that is something that is for the future. The items I just mentioned above are really the ones that we've put our arms around right now. I think we are very excited with the opportunity we have to do this. We're also looking at our Citizens Advisory Committee and do plan to add members of our business community, certainly students from both ISU and Heartland Community College, and community engagement. I think we've all learned through the process, once we are able to do that in a more relaxed setting, we definitely do intend to continue the community engagement because it's been very informative and helpful for us, as well as hopefully informing our community, our riders and our potential riders of just what we are able to do in the way of transporting them. So I think that's my brief comment on the future recommendations.
Thank you, Trustee Buchanan. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the investment of the $250,000, the request that we're seeking for the work group recommendations. As Trustee Buchanan already mentioned, I believe we've spoken to all council members about the work group recommendations back in early March. Connect originally planned to use the investment of $28,946 for the one rate for all CM service, one rate for all fare structure, and expansion of CM service to the city and town limits. And additionally, $20,000 for the zero fare green route pilot. In looking at the zero fare green route pilot, we did cut that due to the pandemic. The board did not believe now was the right time to test the zero fare pilot during the pandemic. As we know, most of the entertainment events in both uptown and downtown Bloomington have been canceled. We don't know how long we'll be dealing with the current pandemic. So then the remaining investment would have been used to decrease federal funding used in the operating budget. So for the revised investment allocation, Connect would apply $225,000 for the one rate for all fare structure and $25,000 for the CN expansion to provide service to the city and town limits of Connect Mobility. Much like the city of Bloomington, Connect is facing an unprecedented situation caused by the pandemic. Our previous ridership and fare revenue projections are now obsolete. We don't know when ridership will return to pre-COVID levels, and this will affect our fare revenue collected. We shifted the town and city investment to ensure that fares remain equitable and affordable, and bus service continues without disruption. At this time, we remain cautious but optimistic regarding state funding, which reimburses 65% of Connect's operating expenses. And I will talk much more about our budget challenges in the next slide. So Connect Transit is restoring service in August. Like I said, we reduced most of our peak service back in early March. The board will continue to review this plan of restoring service as positive cases have been increasing in our community. We are restoring service because ridership decreased 75% in April and only decreased 25% in June. This is a 50% increase in ridership, and we believe most of this is due to the shelter-in-place order being lifted into May. Peak service has already been restored on the Green Route and the Lime Express routes to deal with the sizable increase in ridership. Fare collection has been suspended since March, as I've mentioned prior to this. The board and I are aware of the financial impact that our customers are dealing with due to the pandemic, and customers have been very thankful for the suspension of fares, and as this is saving them monthly on transportation costs. So before restoring fares, we have to ensure the safety of our customers and operators. The fare box is positioned very close to the operator on the bus, and we're installing a driver barrier. These barriers will protect the operator and customers when they're in close contact with each other. The board is also taking a month-to-month approach in reviewing fare collection, and we are, again, factoring in the coronavirus positive cases in our community. When fare collection is restored, as Trustee Buchanan mentioned, we want to give our riders at least a 30-day notice because it'll have a financial impact on them. But I want to caution that the board is taking a month-to-month approach on this. At this time, we don't know when we'll start collecting fares again. But as we do restore service and review the continuation of fare collection, we must continue to provide essential transit service safely as ridership increases. Employees and customers will still be required to wear a face covering, and we want riders to practice safe physical distancing on the buses. Regular cleaning and disinfecting of buses will continue. Some buses will be cleaned twice a day, others will be cleaned once, but our entire fleet of buses will be cleaned every day. Additional cleaning and disinfecting will increase expenses, and consistent disinfecting of buses will be the new normal post-COVID. We'll also be providing another option for our customers to pay fares beyond cash and passes. When we start collecting fares, mobile ticketing provides a hand-free option to ride the bus. Mobile ticketing also allows for fare capping, which is very important for our customers. Low-income customers cannot afford the upfront cost to buy a monthly pass, so they end up spending twice as much money for transit on a monthly basis. We're excited about adding mobile ticketing and believe it'll have a positive impact on our customers. And then Connect's also providing additional wayfinding and communication tools within the bus with the addition of interior bus displays. So for individuals who are hearing impaired, the display will show the next bus stop information. So right now on the bus and inside we have automated vehicle announcements, but those that are hearing impaired can't hear those. So we'll have a physical display that'll show the next bus stop for those individuals. These displays will also have the ability to sell advertising for additional revenue opportunities. The Connect also displays safety informational videos and public service announcements. So we want to take and fully utilize these interior displays. So now I want to discuss our budget challenges that we face due to the pandemic. I apologize. So in regards to state funding, IDOT reimburses Connect 65% of our expenses and is our largest funding source. I want to provide some background on IDOT funding towards transit agencies. So a portion of the sales tax revenue collected goes to the downstate transit fund, and this funding is then distributed to transit agencies. So due to the pandemic, sales tax revenue has obviously decreased. IDOT has informed all downstate transit agencies that revenue is unknown beyond the first quarter. And the reason I believe that state funding is in jeopardy is because the state has requested $5 billion in federal funds to balance the current state budget. It's uncertain if this grant or loan will be granted. So the state is also factoring in a graduated income tax that will need to be approved by Illinois voters to balance this budget. So beyond the first quarter, which for us ends on September 2020, we don't know if we'll be reimbursed 65%, which is required by the state statute, or if we'll receive a reduced percentage of our expenses. State lawmakers will all have to obviously make some very tough decisions as we progress through this fiscal year. But I do have better news in terms of our federal funding. Connect did receive $9.1 million of CARES Act funding from the federal government. Congress approved this funding for additional expenses related to the coronavirus and to replace lost revenue. Connect may have to use all of this CARES Act funding over the next 2 years to continue operating if state funding is reduced. This pandemic has also emphasized the importance of having reserve funding. Connect Transit was in a similar position back in 2016 when the state did not have an approved budget. We ended up using all of our reserve funding to continue providing service because the state wasn't paying us. Suspending fair service, obviously, during this time would be devastating for our customers and the community, and we want to avoid that at any cost. So this screen here is just to highlight our operating budget for fiscal year 2021. So Connect's operating budget is $14.5 million, and this budget does include IDOT reimbursing Connect at 65% of expenses. It also includes fair revenue of $1,675,000. And as we've talked a lot about tonight, we have discontinued fair collection, so we have no idea if we'll get 1.675 million. I think it's highly doubtful at this point in time. So Connect Transit has prepared a budget scenario if IDOT reduces our operating revenue due to lower sales tax receipts. This scenario shows a reduction of IDOT funding only 45% of our expenses. Again, I want to remind the council, we don't know how much IDOT will reimburse Connect for expenses. So this is just a hypothetical budget scenario. I wanted to show you an example to demonstrate the importance of the investment made by the city and town if IDOT funding is reduced. So any reduction in IDOT funding and IDOT revenue will be replaced by our federal CARES Act funding. And when this has been exhausted, we'll then start using our local reserve fund. We are in, again, unprecedented times, and our goal is to get through this pandemic without having to eliminate service because we know our customers are reliant on the essential transit service we're providing in the community. So in terms of the Downtown Transportation Center site selection study, we formed a technical advisory committee. We started meeting in January of this year. Those meetings did get kind of delayed because of the pandemic. The committee members have committee members made up of staff, city staff, downtown business owners, riders, and community members. Farnsworth Group was hired to lead this study and has made good progress on the 16 tasks that were outlined in the scope of work. And they're working very closely with the City of Bloomington staff on preparing those documents and getting documents and studies done by the city to finish those tasks. There are 8 potential sites that were being reviewed for the future transportation center. There's a survey that we're asking residents and riders to fill out, provide feedback. So if you haven't filled out the survey, it can be found on Connect Transit's website or Facebook page. Additionally, a public meeting will take place next Wednesday, July 29th at the BCPA. We are restricting individuals up to 50. You do have to wear a mask, but this information about this next meeting, public meeting, is also located on our Connect Transit website. And we're asking for feedback in regards to 6 questions pertaining to the new transportation center. So we believe the selection site study will be done with a final recommendation sometime in August or September. So this concludes our update. Thank you for allowing Chairman Ryan Whitehouse, Trustee Judy Buchanan, and myself to provide this update and presentation to the council. And at this
Thank you
time,
very much. Thanks, Isaac. We're going to go ahead and start with council discussion and questions. And so I'm going to start the clock here. And also, there we go. I'm going to start with, Councilmember Craybill, Matthey, and Bolin in that order.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, Isaac, much appreciated this presentation. I've been very happy with the working group and how Connect Transit and the board has worked with them. And I think you guys have done a very good job with regard to handling the COVID situation to both protect employees as well as the ridership. And just like the city, I appreciate you looking at potential COVID financial impacts because we have to have a plan. So I like that. So just a couple of questions on things on the working group. Some people have told me that the facilitators that were hired, I think for $53,000, did not complete their work. And if that's the case, is Connect Transit receiving any type of a refund on those services?
Isaac?
Yeah, so we are receiving a refund. They have not billed us or invoiced us yet, but we are receiving a refund through Smart Growth America.
Great.
We're not actually sent a check yet for any of those services yet.
Okay. And as I understand it, according to the intergovernmental agreement, the budget for, I think, is it 2021 for Connect Transit was supposed to be submitted to the city and town. I don't believe that was done. And if that's true, I guess what happened and how can we prevent that from happening in the future?
So we send out our board packet. It's made public. We send it, obviously, both town and city managers are both on our board. It's a public document. I am not sure, and I would need legal counsel from the city and town on the process on, does the city of Bloomington or the town of Normal need to vote on that budget document for it to be approved? Because I don't know if Section 8 of the IGA actually specifically says that they have to approve it. I think it talks about rejection of the budget.
Just to be clear,
Yeah,
I think Jeff, I'm sorry, just to interject, but it is the case that we do need to have the information, even if there's a question of whether or not we actually formally have to vote on it. But I'm sorry, Councilmember Craven, go ahead.
Thank you. And I wanted to make sure, just confirm some philosophies that Connect Transit has. So is it true that Connect Transit should be affordable, accessible, and equitable in its care for our most transit reliant population? Is that
Mr. Crable, since Isaac is staff, I would be happy to answer these
Sure.
questions. So
Thanks, Ryan.
Just want to jump in there and thanks for the opportunity. So didn't mean to interrupt you, but go ahead and start and then I'll be happy to answer those.
Okay, yeah, I'll just repeat that. Do you agree that Connect Transit should be affordable, accessible, and equitable in its care for our most transit reliant population?
Yes.
Okay. And is the goal of Connect Transit that as many people use fixed routes versus Connect Mobility, if they're able?
We provide service, both those services, because those services provide very different issues. Fixed route is there for individuals that can ride that service. It's there on the routine, and Connect Mobility is there for individuals that need to get from point A from their home to a specific location. But we value both those services as a system.
But I guess if somebody's on Connect Mobility that could be on a fixed route, that would give them more, I guess, freedom in using the route to go different places versus the kind of the pick up and drop off Connect Mobility system.
Well, correct. While we believe in Connect Mobility, if a rider could use the fixed route, it was more affordable and would allow more resources for us to provide services to the community.
I'm
sorry to interrupt, but you're going on 5 minutes, so I'm going to need to have you to wind up. Go ahead.
Okay. What's the progress? And I think it was 2020 to have 90 bus stops made ADA compliant. Do you know what the status of that is?
90 bus stops for FY 2021.
Okay.
So we are starting on, we have most of the design plans done for most of the stops for FY 2021. It's now just getting the construction bids awarded, and then they can start the construction.
Let me
There
just
is it's a long process. Obviously, we're working with both town and city engineering departments to get the permits before we can actually start construction.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm gonna facilitate this a little bit. Ryan, quickly. Yeah, go ahead.
The Better Bus Stop campaign has been important to this system and to this board since before 2018. We're making progress. We are ramping everything up. And from our understanding, by 2024, we'll have 100% ADA compliant, which makes us one of the very few, if not the only system that has that. So we're looking forward to that.
That's 2024. Is that correct?
Correct.
Right. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'll give you one
more question.
Yeah, very quickly. Come on.
Okay. This is kind of specific. Somebody asked me about this. The bus stops on Alexander Road and that have a decent amount of ridership. Are there plans now to make them compliant?
Yeah, so we're going to work very, very closely with the city of Bloomington because we need sidewalks throughout that area. And obviously with Alexander Road, it's always been an issue. There's ditches on both sides. So we're going to have to work with the city of Bloomington to figure out how we can go about doing that. It's going to be a large investment, obviously from the city of Bloomington, to put in sidewalks on both sides of the road.
Thank you, Isaac. And I'm going to have to, I just want to say on that particular point, I remember going through that and in fact, in the last election and thinking, if I lived out here, I would hate government of all forms because it's like you've been neglected out there. And I don't mean Connect Transit. I mean, city government, others. It's really, it's a shame. And we do need to do something about that. I'm sorry. I just want to move this right along because I cannot allow one council member to use almost half the allotted time. I apologize. I'm going to go next to Councilmember Matthey and then Bolin and Black.
Mayor, I think you should just be prepared right now that we're going way over time on this.
That's fine, but just you keep going and we'll see if we do. I'm not going to plan for a budget overhaul.
All right. So first of all, Jen, thank you all for the presentation. Really appreciate it. Isaac, I think you dodged a bullet right there at the end because I was going to tell you that White House promised a location reveal tonight, but you dodged that one with your last slide. So good on you there. I had a question about, I keep hearing about the bus stop near the VA clinic, the new VA clinic, and I wondered if you could address that.
Sure. Jamie, thank you for that opportunity to address that. I know that's a concern. First and foremost, Connect Transit, we think veterans are very important and we want to make sure we have that. Back in July of last year, before the VA was open, we had congressional delegation, local elected leadership, state lawmakers, VA groups in with the VA and had discussions about what we could try to accomplish for that center. So the three things that were kind of requested that day were front door delivery. The second one was a new platform, ADA compliant. The third one was a waiver of Connect Mobility to be done. The second one and the third one were done almost instantly. We do have a ADA compliant pad at the VA center, and we did waive all the qualifications for Connect Mobility. Let me explain. So for people that are listening in the council and veterans, anyone that is going to use the VA, as long as you live within the Bloomington normal corporate limits, can contact Connect Transit 24 hours prior to your appointment and get door-to-door service to the VA. We will take you from where you are, your home, right to the VA for the same cost. Right now, we're not collecting fares, but when we do fares, for the same cost of if you were to do the fixed route, it's ADA compliant. Now, we understand that some would like it to be the fixed route to be there too. There is hope in the future for this, and we know that the city of Bloomington is working on this and Connect Transit's also being a partner on this. There is hope for that when the Hamilton Road expansion is done, that we can provide a possible bus that would go right to the front, not in the parking lot because that's a safety concern, but can get closer to that facility. So while I know there has been some contention over this, I think that we have tried our best to accommodate. Door-to-door service is a pretty good solution.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I appreciate the clarification on that because I've, as somebody who served myself, I've gotten a lot of questions on that. The other thing I want to just make a quick note of is I beat you guys up pretty badly the last year or maybe the year before that about the large buses And I know we've talked about that a lot, and it's become a running joke at this point. But I did read an article, and gosh, it was from Seattle, I think, that actually talked about the same issue they had there. And it actually framed the conversation around those as standardizing on a type of bus similar to what Southwest Airlines has done by standardizing on the 737, not the MAX, the regular one. And so that they had one type of plane to carry parts for, one type of plane to fix, one type of plane to handle training for, and all requirements for, and it actually lowered their cost to operate that system down quite a bit. So I just wanted to formally retract my browbeating of Isaac and even Mike McCurdy, although he probably deserves it somewhere else, over those large bus systems. And thank you guys for the work and doing a great job this last couple of years. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Jamie. I appreciate that. And we appreciate the little criticisms you give us. So the bus, what you said about Southwest, that's exactly why we do that. It's there. The other thing that we have talked about that maybe we haven't communicated as well as we should is, just like you build roads, you build your infrastructure for peak hours, we buy buses for peak hours. That's why we buy those buses. When we need those big buses, they have to be there. And there are other times that there might not be completely full, but those buses have to be standardized, and we buy them for our peak hours.
Thank you, Ryan. Actually, that's an excellent point. And I appreciate that, because it's going to remind me to make that point too. When people say, well, look at all the buses at 10:30, they're not full. Well, yeah, neither are the streets. And nobody complains about that, right? Councilmember Bolin and Black, and we might, even though some might not have faith, we might get through under budget in terms of time. Councilmember Bolin.
Okay, guys, thanks for all the information. And I do know about all the work because I attended all those meetings and I learned a lot. The only question not the only question, I have a question. If you know, how much did you lose with the COVID? I mean, do you have a number figure about the loss for the system?
Yeah, so we know in terms of fare revenue, we lost about 250,000 because we stopped collecting fares in mid-March through June. Obviously, it's continuing. We're not collecting fares through July. The board's going to be voting on again to extend the continuation of fare collection.
And you referenced the McLean County Regional Planning Commission for future plans. And I wonder how much is in the current short-term plan that could be applied to near-term changes and improvements. Has anybody looked into that?
Yep, we talked in our conversations, and before partnering with McLean County Regional Planning, obviously we want them to use the short-range transit plan to look at things that they've recommended that we do in that document, but also other areas where we have service gaps in the community to take a look at those. And we don't have, Connect Transit doesn't have a motive here on this is where we want to put service. We really want to go out and just ask the community when we're allowed to after this pandemic and have that input from them saying, where do we need service at? Where are some of the gaps? Obviously, from the staff level, McLean County Regional Planning, we know where some service gaps already are, but we want the community to tell us, where would you like to see additional services? And then as the work group recommendations have stated, we would come back and ask the town and city to fund those additional services.
Councilmember Bolin, thanks for the questions. I think on top of what Isaac has said, the board of directors has kind of given the direction. I'm going to use this word, but I don't have a better word. Connect Transit's kind of in survival mode. We're not dying. We're not, broke right now. But what I'm saying by that is right now, we're just trying to keep the ship steady, the bus steady during this COVID situation to see where we are financially. We are constantly looking at different routes and where we can do stuff. But right now, we're just trying to keep the system operational. And once we get through this, I'm sure just like the city and other communities have done that, we're just trying to steady everything. And once we get through this, we'll really be ramping up those conversations with stakeholders and all the community and city council members about where we can either add or adjust service. So, but for right now, I think direction of the board to the staff is let's just steady the bus system for now.
Great.
Okay. Well, I do know that part of the ask for the additional funding is to address the structural deficit. So I'm aware of that that's part of it. And the other question I have is, how did the board come to determine the items that are on the executive summary? Was that voted on at a board meeting or some other process?
Let's turn to Ryan. Ryan, you're the chair.
Yeah, so you're talking about the one rate for all and everything. Yeah, we did. We voted on those. Judy, help me here. Memory, because we've been locked up. I think 2 months ago we voted on that to implement that. So the board has reviewed that. We did approve the original plan when we looked at that. The board listened to the group and Judy's work and the working group's work. And then we took those issues that that Isaac presented on today and decided to try to implement those as soon as possible so we could get some of that stuff done.
So what I'm hearing is that you did not vote on these 3 or 4 issues?
No, you did.
No, we did vote on those issues.
You did vote on them.
We did.
Okay.
Vote. I'm sorry if I wasn't clear. We did vote on them.
Excuse me. Whoa. Trustee Buchanan. Yeah.
I just wanted to note that it was in January that the recommendations were presented to the board, which included all the items and more that we discussed this evening. That was approved by the board, but prior to that, it had been unanimously approved by the work group. And as has been mentioned, we looked at those that we could begin working on and implementing sooner rather than later. And so that's been the impetus. But and everything that we've done on this in the way of taking public action has been approved by the board.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Thanks. And at this point, some of these kinds of questions actually are empirical questions that are very quick. We really don't need to discuss them. I'm going to move on now to Councilmember Black, and then if we go too far, I may need to get a motion to extend our discussion. Councilmember Black.
I can make that motion right now to extend by 10 minutes.
Okay. All right. We'll add that by 10 minutes because we're almost done. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Emig. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Matthey,
Yes.
Councilmember Bolin,
Yes.
Councilmember Milawambwe,
Yes.
Councilmember Emig,
Julie?
Yes.
thank you. Councilmember Painter,
Yes.
Councilmember Carrillo,
Yes.
Councilmember Black,
Yes.
Councilmember Crable,
Yes.
Councilmember Gray.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. We're 10 minutes further. And just also to clarify, if you've got empirical questions on things, they should be able to be answered almost immediately, or we can do those outside of our meeting. At this point, so we can continue to go, I'm going to return back to, I believe, Councilmember, who was I on? Councilmember Emig? Or Black, I'm sorry.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Terry. And thank you, Connect Transit, Isaac and Judy and Ryan. Appreciate your time. Just at a high level, I know that interest in what I have to say is going to be waning more and more quickly. But what I would throw out there is that I think it's very important that we tackle the intergovernmental agreement before the end of the year. Jeff pointed out very fairly that there's some ambiguity around at least the budget projection. And, we've kind of seen how that creates confusion. So that's a very important thing that I think, COVID or not, we got to get, ironed out before the end of the year. I know that I've thrown some ideas out there. Others have thrown ideas out there. So I'm obviously there's no answer to that today, but just more be aware that this is to me, the top issue when it comes to Connect Transit.
Thank you.
Go ahead, yeah, Ryan.
Okay. Oh, Ryan, did you want to say something?
No, as we've talked about, Scott, point taken, and happy to carry out whatever you and the city of Bloomington and the town of Orem will do.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councilmember Emig.
Well, I think Judy wanted to say something, and I had one more piece.
Did you want to add something? Judy, I didn't see your hand up.
Okay, no, thank you, Scott. And I think the board will stand behind you and other members of the council and encourage you to work on that agreement, because it really does represent the partnership and what the expectations are. So the more clear that becomes, I think the better we will be able to perform our duties.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you very much.
And my last point, just briefly, is that, I think the theme for the next few months for me is going to be, put your money to it. Where's the money? And we talk a lot about inequities and structural changes, and talked about this for years. I think Connect Transit should be entirely fare free, and we should put money towards that goal. I don't know what that looks like. More than just one route. I think the whole system should be free. And maybe we use our upcoming weed money, and maybe the town of Normal can do that as well, to fund that, and that would be a revenue source. So, I think that's important. It's a critical service for people. It's an economic development tool. And I obviously won't have the answer today, but as time goes on, mapping out what a totally fare-free system could look like. And you know what, we will have some revenue that we didn't have in previous years that can go to speak to some of those long-term issues.
Thank you. Pot for transit. Gotcha. Next, Councilmember Emig and Carrillo, and I think we may be just about done then. Councilmember Emig.
Yeah, so this is kind of piggybacking on what Alderman Black just said, and thank you for your presentation and time. So in a way, I'm wondering, just really wondering, if we have a natural experiment available now that we've had free transit. I know that COVID creates a completely different context, but I'm just curious. I know that we don't get a lot of revenue from our fares in general. And I know the system has structural challenges, but it might be worth studying, how this played out at this time, since we haven't been charging fare for a while. And at this point, I don't know if and when that will change in the near future. And my second question is just to clarify that there is going to be a public discussion on the 29th at the BCPA. And there will be registration information on the Connect Transit website. And you referred to 6 questions. Is this specifically regarding the discussion about the transit station and where it will be located, or is this more, writ large about the transit system generally? And will it be live streamed? Will people be able to access it remotely?
I'm going to turn to Ryan. Ryan, you chair the board.
I'm going to defer to Isaac on all those things.
Oh, okay, sorry.
So the 6 questions that we're asking are already on our website. We're asking people to just be thinking about the questions on what kind of amenities do you want at the new transfer station center? What do you like most about it now? What would you like to see changed? We also have a survey also that people can fill out, and we want people to fill out. It's also located on our website as well. So the survey and the 6 questions are a little bit different. We're not going to be live streaming the BCPA meeting. However, people can respond on our website to the 6 questions and answer those. But we really, really want to get riders to fill out the survey and give us feedback. We want downtown business owners and other stakeholders to give us feedback on this. It's just really challenging for us in the midst of COVID to have public meetings, and we know we have to have them, but to get people more involved, we're allowing for other ways to comment on this, whether it be through emailing us or on our website, because we know people may not want to attend a public meeting at this point.
Okay. Councilmember Emig, anything else?
Yep. No, thank you.
Councilmember Carrillo.
Hey, thank you so much for the presentation and for the work with the work group. I'm really happy to see the recommendations come back to us. So I just want to retweet Alderman Black about the intergovernmental agreement. Think that definitely needs to get landed before the end of the year. And then also a retweet on the fare-free system, funded by POT or otherwise, and definitely think that we have a really good experiment that we didn't intend for, that we can take a lot of learnings away. I guess my only comment is, I get a lot of constituents that reach out about the accessibility issue in terms of the bus stops. That continues to be the #1 issue that folks bring to me. And so for my part, I guess I want to say that I don't want to continue to hear the sidewalk issue as the reason that we can't achieve greater levels of accessibility for the bus system. Because I think we should take on that fight, right? So I want to see the advocates at Connect Transit hold the fire to our feet as elected officials. Like, we have a good working relationship, but I think that whatever you all need in terms of sidewalks, like, let us have that fight if we need to have it, but don't let that be a reason that we can't improve the system as quickly as possible. Because that's the main thing. I don't think nobody's opposed to the transportation center, but folks are like, I just need the stop by my house to be a stop that I can use. So I'm going to continue to make that a priority in these conversations.
I just want to say thank you, Councilmember Carrillo, and I'm going to turn it over to Ryan. But I hear the same things that Councilmember Carrillo is saying, and just by direct riding around, as I mentioned in the last election, just looking at Alexander Road and down, I was embarrassed to be the mayor, to be honest. Ryan, thank you.
Council members, thank you for those comments. We at Connect Transit want to do that too. And we're trying our best. Let me shout out to your city manager, since he has come to the community and with our staff, with Isaac as well. Our staff is in constant contact with your city planners and the city manager staff about future developments when we're talking about that stuff. So transit is at the table. In the past, we possibly weren't. I'm not pointing fingers. It's just, it probably wasn't top of mind for everybody, but your administration has allowed us to be top of mind when we're looking at developments, and we will work and we will try to hold you guys accountable in a polite way. We will do our part with a partnership with the city of Bloomington to make sure that we're 100% ADA compliant by 2024.
Great.
Polite is way more than I was asking for, but thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you very much. We're going to go ahead and move on, and we appreciate Isaac, Ryan, Judy. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for all your work. At this point, we're going to move right on to a presentation and discussion of the Public Safety and Community Relations Board annual report as requested by the administration. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn over to Mr. Gleason if he wants to introduce Arthur Taylor, who's the previous chair of the Public Safety and Community Relations Board. And we have a 20-minute presentation, about a 10-minute council discussion. And let me just also clarify here, our discussion does need to be germane to the report that the commission is presenting to us. If we have broader issues, as we certainly are going to consider, of reform of our law enforcement system, we should do those either separately by aldermanic request, or you can just talk to me and City Manager Gleason, and we will be sure we'll work something out. So this is actually, just to clarify, we're focusing on the report that we're about to receive, and then we have about 10 minutes of clarification questions. And I'm going to go ahead, Mr. Gleason, I'm going to quickly turn it over to you. And are you going to introduce Mr. Taylor?
Yes, I will. Your introduction was perfect, Mayor and Council. This is the annual report that's prepared and presented by the PSCRB, and Mr. Art Taylor is the past chair. Art?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor, Mr. Gleason, and City Council. I always look forward to having the opportunity to share the report with you. I recently, my term recently ended, and the annual report was put forth by me at the last meeting that I chaired, and then our election for new chairs and vice chair took place. I was delegated to perform this duty and share the report. So I speak on behalf of the past vice chair, Jan Lancaster, and the current board chair, Robert Bosquez, and current board vice chair, Reverend William Bennett. In addition, Serena Fish, Sally Rudolph, and Jeff Woodard. So those are the members of the board. And this is the annual report of the PSCRB, which was established in 2017. And this brief summary of the activities of the PSCRB are as follows. The following highlights were the review of board rules and materials developed, review of monthly and quarterly meeting dates, presentation to and feedback from the community, reports on complaints presented, and board rule amendments. So the review of the review is one that was established by our board rules when we first came into existence, and the PSCRB held its first meeting on January of 2019 on January 9, 2019. The board was sworn in. Introductions of the board members were made. Staff and Bloomington Police Department chief and assistant chiefs and enacting ordinance was reviewed. We discussed, our discussions were coordinated, and the topics included confirmation of the board chair and vice chair, discussion of board rules, and future meeting dates. The PSCRB chair and vice chair were confirmed, and the board rules were reviewed. Community posters and brochures were also reviewed. The review of our monthly and quarterly meeting dates we were established, and our monthly meeting dates were established for the second Wednesday of each month. Our quarterly meetings were scheduled for the third Wednesday of each quarter. Meeting places were alternated between the City Hall, YWCA, Community Room, Wayman AME Church, Mount Pisgah Baptist Church, Mid Central Community Action, and City of Refuge Ministries. And I'll pause here from the report. The alternating meeting date locations, was primarily the result of one of our quarterly meetings that we held. That there was quite frankly a criticism of the board for meeting at the Bloomington Police Department, which, as people have known, that we have not received a heck of a lot of complaints. However, one of the reasons for us alternating locations was we wanted to make sure that we were presenting an image and were responding to issues that were raised to us at the quarterly meeting, that we were too close to the police department, and that not being our charge, we decided that best for image sakes to move our meetings around, and we were successful in doing that. We have not met at the Bloomington Police Department since that time. Presentations and feedback from the community dialogue sessions. The monthly meetings include reports from the Bloomington Police on the number of complaints received in previous months, year to date, and those pending investigation. Future meeting dates, locations, and pending discussions items were also discussed. The Bloomington Police reported that for 2019, there were 11 total complaints received, compared with 20 total complaints for 2018 and 15 for 2017. Topics at the quarterly meeting, at the quarterly meetings included introduction of board members, review of the enacting ordinance, review of board rules, review of the PSCRB posters and brochures, review of the Bloomington Police Department complaint review process, the review of the PSCRB request for review process, presentations on community policing, presentations on police recruiting, the application process and qualifications to become a Bloomington police officer, community forum on the hiring of the next Bloomington police chief, presentations on Axon body-worn cameras, presentations of the PSCRB 5 questions to stakeholders in the community. And those questions included, is there clarity that the PSCRB cannot review complaints until after an initial complaint is filed with the Bloomington Police Department? Was there clarity that after the Bloomington Police Department sends its response, a person must complete a PSCRB form to request a review by the PSCRB? Are fears of completing a PSCRB form being addressed by the processes of the Bloomington Police Department and that the PSCRB have established? Do stakeholder groups still believe in the need for the PSCRB? And if so, why do we not have any complaints received? We also open the floor for questions and suggestions. I will tell you that the consensus from not only the board and from the stakeholders and those comments from the community did indicate and strongly believed that the PSCRB serves an important role in the community. And then lastly, a report on the complaints that were presented to us. The PSCRB received its first request for review in January 2019 through the City Legal Department. The report was 19R-001. The board reviewed the citizens' request for review and requested additional documents from the Bloomington Police Department and Legal Department. Following its established board rules and maintaining confidentiality guidelines, the board found that the Bloomington Police Department had followed its complaint review process, exonerating a police officer in question, and did not recommend any policy or practice revisions. The PSCRB received its second request for review in December 2019 through the City Legal Department, and that was 19-R-002. Information was gathered and prepared for review of the board, which occurred in January of 2020. I will tell you the result of that review, since the complaint did kind of cross from one year into the next. The results will be included in the annual report in 2020. Following all established board rules and maintaining confidentiality guidelines, the board found the Bloomington Police Department had followed its complaint review process, exonerating the police officer in question. The board did recommend that policy language be written to ensure the timeliness and of communication to citizens when their Illinois Vehicle Code violations are voided, canceled, or removed. These results were communicated to the citizen with copies of the communication sent to the city manager and the Bloomington Police Department. And then action items that the board, that we recommended some amendments to our board rules, basically to change or amend Chapter 1, Section 3, the first sentence, that the board shall annually on the first meeting in May elect its chair and vice chair. And then we added to paragraph 1, Section 3, that the board chair or designee shall be a liaison to the city council for purposes of reporting to the board pertinent city council activities. That more or less concludes my report. One note that I will add is that we currently have an opening on the two openings on the PSCRB. One, Sally Rudolph, who chose not to be reappointed, and then recently the resignation of Jan Lancaster. So the board now has two openings that need to be filled. As the mayor mentioned earlier, one of the action items that we'll be considering in the very near future at our next meeting and putting some flesh to the mayor's recommendation that the PSCRB hold public dialogue sessions on police reform. And we're anxious and ready, willing, and able to hold those meetings and initiate community dialogue and be able to make some reports and recommendations to both the mayor and the city manager. And at this moment, I'll accept any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to start a question period right now. We have 10 minutes budgeted, and we're going to start with Councilmember Carrillo. I think you have your hand up.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Art, for that presentation. I'm glad you got voluntold, because I think that that's what means delegated was code for voluntold. So a quick question. So where you ended was conversation around police reform. And I just, as a point of information, want to revisit something that was brought up to me a few months ago, which is that my understanding was that given that the welcoming city ordinance failed to pass in the city council, that there was a directive from the mayor that was given to the chief at the time, Chief Wheeler, to work with the PSCRB to craft some language that would go into our police policy around interactions with ICE. Did that ever happen? And did we publicize that?
No. The board, in discussion around that initial conversation, the board basically reviewed the request, and at that moment chose not to engage in the conversation. The board, by unanimous consent, basically agreed that it was outside of the spectrum of what the PSCRB was established for. And we had those discussions with the mayor to more or less explain the board's view of that, and we're awaiting some additional dialogue about that. So we never engaged in that conversation whatsoever.
Got it. Thanks. So I guess the second question is, one of the things that I heard, and this came up when you were talking about the meetings being held at the police department, but some lack of clarity around what the role of the police is within the PSCRB. So, are they the folks who are facilitating the meetings, or setting agendas, or so who determines basically what happens at a PSCRB meeting?
The board chair sets the agenda. The police are present, as our staff from the city legal department. Laura Dukowicz is there for clerical and administrative consultation. And the Bloomington police are there to report out for what the complaints are and any questions that the board members may have. The police don't set our agenda. They are a part of our agenda. Because we expect a report from them at each meeting. And unless there are questions that board members raise to clarify issues that may be pertinent to the business of the PSCRB, they're simply there as guests to participate and answer questions as need.
Thank you, Art, for that.
Last question.
Sure.
Okay. So my last question, I guess a little bit of a comment and then a question. So as one of the folks who advocated for the creation of the PSCRB and, working with a lot of other organizations in the community, like Not in Our Town, NAACP, so on, I think, the original proposal for the PSCRB was a board that would have a little bit more power than what you all ended up getting. So it was never really, I don't think, thought of that the only function of the PSCRB would be to review complaints. Some of those initial recommendations included giving the board anything, from subpoena power, an opportunity at a first review of police complaints, and the power to do proactive policy recommendations that would be brought to council on a more regular basis. So I guess my question to you, Art, is given the national context that we find ourselves in, would it be in order for us as a council to revisit the ordinance that established the PSCRB and to consider adding some of those things? Do you think that would make you all more effective at what you have been tasked to do?
Well, first, that's the purview of the city council and the mayor, city manager. the PSCRB is currently established, we live within the guidelines that the city council set for us, which is one of the reasons why we pushed back on the initial conversation around the Welcoming Cities ordinance, because we didn't feel like it was within our lane. We were requested by Tim to Mr. Gleason to conduct dialogue sessions with reference to recommendations for what the citizens wanted to see in the next police chief. We conducted public hearings on that and made recommendations to Mr. Gleason and the mayor as to what we saw as what citizens believed the next police chief should look like. We felt like that was definitely within our lane, and with reference to the relationships between the community and the Bloomington Police Department, the PSCRB has always seen itself as a bridge between the general community and the Bloomington Police Department, which is why during our quarterly meetings, we add to our agendas on a quarterly basis dialogue that includes dialogue from the police to the community and question and answer periods that will allow us to address concerns that the community may have, and open dialogue is encouraged. So the PSCRB, as far as additional things that you have suggested, if it's the desire of the city council and the mayor and the city manager that we should have additional, as you said, quote unquote, additional teeth to make recommendations outside the purview of that we were originally established to do, that's definitely within the purview of the city council and the mayor and the city manager.
Art Taylor, thank you very much. And I just wanted to clarify on that, even though we now are 8 minutes out of our 10 on this matter, but I just wanted to clarify, I have asked Mr. Bosquez to ask to move forward with the police review board to conduct some public hearings as to what reforms in our general process are necessary to make recommendations back to the city council about demilitarization or other kinds of things that we might pursue in the future. But at this point, I'm going to have to move on to Councilmember Craybill and then Black. And at this point, technically, we only have 1 minute. So if your stuff is a little more involved, we're going to need at least some kind of extension.
Mayor?
Motion?
Just a second. Not yet. Councilmember Craybill.
I'll probably take more than a minute, but Art, thank you for the presentation. I don't think the community necessarily understands exactly what the review process is for the PSCRB, and I want to make sure I understand it too. So when a complaint is filed with the PSCRB, the complaint process is reviewed, not the underlying allegations. For instance, if there's an allegation of excessive force, the PSCRB would not review whether excessive force was used, but whether proper protocols were followed by the police in the investigation. Is that true?
That's correct.
Okay. So if the PSCRB found, based on its review, that excessive force maybe was used and the police came to a different conclusion, there really is no avenue for the PSCRB to address that.
No, that's not correct. What we would do is make a recommendation for policy change that would be presented to the city manager and the mayor.
And then my last question would be, do you have any concern that those having complaints against the police department are in any way discouraged because they have to complain to the police directly as compared to an independent body?
That's a good question, and I'm not really sure that we have the time or the place to really get into intent when we talk about whether or not I think that we should have additional teeth as far as the board is concerned. When the board was established, we were established with very strict guidelines that we have taken painstakingly time and dedication to make sure that we stay and live within, which is why I mentioned that if it's the desire of the police, of the mayor and the city manager to add some additional responsibilities to the PSCRB, you are within the purview of your responsibility to make that happen. I will tell you that board members would definitely be amenable to whatever role we were charged with doing, and would carry that out with the best of our ability.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Art.
Thanks. Councilmember Black, are you quick or do I need a motion?
I should be quick. Hopefully I don't set anybody off. So we should be okay. Art, I just wanted to thank you for your service, taking the leadership when this board was created, and stepping in there. Very much appreciated. I know I look at this as one of our council's biggest successes. When this topic kind of percolated up a couple of years ago, we engaged a large swath of the community, from folks who wanted to see a very aggressive board to folks who were opposed to the board entirely, and built a really good coalition around this topic. And it showed when you have an 8-to-1 vote on the creation. And then I remember, I think it was maybe a couple months after that, we had like a 200-page packet of applicants who wanted to be on the board, which I've not seen that type of engagement ever. And so, one of the things that I've noticed as we've had a police discussion is that there's a lot of misinformation out there. People have called me demanding that we do a police review board, which we have. We are the only local government in the immediate area that does it. And people have demand that we do body cameras. We already do body cameras. So, can we do better? Of course. And that's why I'm really excited, Mayor. I wanted to thank you for sending this topic back for public hearing to the Police Review Board, because I think it's important that we get on the record feedback from folks on this topic, and we can do more than just sign a petition or tweet about it. The more people that get involved in the process, the better governance we create, and this is a way to do it. So I'm really excited to see that play out, because I know that I popped onto the last YouTube of the board meeting, and there were 7 people watching, one of which was me. And that's embarrassingly low. And I remember even before, about 12 months ago, we were even having a conversation publicly if we should keep the board going, which I think we absolutely should, but because of the so few complaints. So I'm excited for what the future holds. I think a robust public conversation is what's demanded right now. So I look forward to continuing to work with the board and doing all we can.
Thank you, Alderman Black. I'll say that the members of the board have taken their responsibilities extremely seriously and are extremely dedicated to doing a good job. We realize that it's not our role to encourage complaints. And I want you to make sure that you understand where I'm coming from. When we as board members believe it's very important that people understand the process, and typically our first quarterly meeting of every year, it's our role to go through, first of all, the ordinance that established us, our board rules, and explain what the complaint process is, both to the Bloomington Police Department and the review process that the PSCRB undertakes if a citizen is dissatisfied with the review process or the answer that they got from the Bloomington Police Department's review process of their complaint. We are extremely dedicated to maintaining those. Yes, information is always desired, and we feel some limitations lately, primarily because of COVID, that we're not able to hold live public meetings, and quite frankly, when the mayor requested that we undertake the next sessions for police reform, the first thing that popped into my mind is how are we going to get a public meeting in a Zoom call? Well, those details we'll have to work through, and we'll have to work those things out, because it's of course it's ideal to have that in a public setting, but due to the restrictions that we're all living under, we'll have to figure out the best way to make that happen. But we're definitely encouraged by, first of all, the faith that the mayor and the city manager and you guys have placed on us. And it's my job as past chairman to make sure that you guys understand how seriously we take that role, and how much we look forward to continuing to be the bridge between the community and the police department.
Thank you, Art, and we appreciate everything that you've done. Although I do have Councilmember Lawambwe. Are you quick? You have a quick question?
It's going to be quick. It's just quick comment.
It's going to have to be. Okay.
Okay. All right. So first of all, I wanted to thank Art, for his work on the board, being the first chairman and being one of the first members of the board. I think he helps to establish the culture for how the board is going to do its work, and I think it's going to carry over in future years. So I just want to say thank you very much. I also wanted to get a sense of just generally from your opinion, what the attendance has been like at the board meetings, just to get a sense of, the level of interest. And I'm sure there will be more now, but I just wanted to get that sense from, your past work. And if there's also anything, without necessarily looking to encourage complaints, but where is there anything the council can do or the board can do to make it easier for people to come and express their concerns?
Art?
Yes. Well, first of all, the nature of the topics and how well our meetings are publicized are always determinative of the crowd size that we've gotten. When we had our dialogue sessions around the next police chief, for example, that was extremely well attended, and we held it at City of Refuge Church, and we had a very large crowd there. We've had other quarterly meetings that have not been as well attended. The ones that we had via Zoom, you saw the results of what that is. So that's kind of discouraging from the perspective of what the COVID has done for us in the way of holding public meetings. But that does not necessarily mean that the topic that we're going to be discussing in the very near future is not something that's going to be extremely interesting for the community to take part in. And I'm looking forward to when we do get around to determining how many sessions and what the topics are going to be and what the questions are going to be, and how our stakeholders that represent different factions within the community, how they're going to react to some of those discussions, the input that you guys will have in some of the groundwork that's going to be laid for the discussions that are going to be had. All those things give me encouragement to say that we're the perfect group to hold these and facilitate these discussions, and I'm looking forward to them.
Thank you very much, Art. Again, thank you. And
thank you.
If you'll take that information and the thanks and the accolades you've gotten from our council back to the board. We appreciate that, and we look forward to seeing what recommendations and public hearings you can do. And again, it doesn't have to always be Zoom. I didn't specify a timetable. I said sometime in the next several months. So hopefully it's not just Zoom, that there are other possibilities to get people involved. At this point, we're going to move on to council initiatives. and we have a council initiative. And this again, I'm holding everybody. I'm holding everybody to down to 3 minutes. Okay, so Councilmember Milwamba, you've got 3 minutes to explain what you're proposing, and we've got you either say yes, no, or maybe 1 or 2 sentences when I circle back around. So in other words, we want to know whether or not this is an initiative that the council wants to talk about in the future. So no speechifying, no filibustering, but we're going to start with Councilmember Milwamba.
Oh, goodness. Okay, I'm under pressure here.
You filled it out.
So thank you. Go ahead.
I'm just saying, you get 3 minutes. Go ahead.
That's right. Okay. All right. So thank you all for giving me the opportunity to discuss this particular initiative. I don't always submit council initiatives, but when I do, it's about Juneteenth. Juneteenth is a celebration that originated in Texas, and I'm saying this, for the benefit of our audience. When on June 19th, 1865, General Gordon Granger from the Union Army read the Emancipation Proclamation to slaves in Galveston, more than 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation had been announced by President Lincoln. So the idea of a city holiday came about for me around Juneteenth, interestingly, as I was listening to a radio program, and the main takeaway from the program was that there are quite a few Americans who are not aware of what Juneteenth stands for. So within the last month, my thoughts have evolved to the point where I think we could achieve the same goals by pairing an observance with some really impactful programming. And why do I think it's important to learn about this day? Whether you're African American or not, is because slavery and the racial discrimination that they have been, African Americans have been subjected to, has been pretty significant. And if we're going to live, work, and play together in this community, I think it's important that we understand what matters to each other. As you probably realize, it took George Floyd dying on the street in front of the whole world for many to be awakened to the concerns of African Americans. And it also took something like COVID for many to be awakened to the health disparities faced by people of color, particularly African Americans. So to me, Juneteenth can not only serve for us to learn about this particular day, but also about the contemporary struggles of African Americans in our community. And this would be an opportunity for us to reflect on the pressing issues facing the community. And as we mentioned, we have some upcoming conversations with the PSCRB, but we also have conversations in the community around healthcare, education, economic empowerment. And I believe we can use Juneteenth as an annual opportunity for us to be able to do that and to weave that into the culture of our community, rather than wait to react until something bad happens. In addition to those conversations, I think Juneteenth can take the character of a celebration. I've seen in many other places where people have done parades, they've done concerts and things like that. And this is where I think the possibility of economic development can come into play. We can make this event and this particular day something really, really, really big. And in between Chicago and St. Louis, I think it will be fairly unique for us to have something like that. So I'm envisioning that the programming component of this idea would be spearheaded by the Human Relations Commission. We have very capable commissioners. We have staff supporting them who bring a wealth of experience to bear. And in addition, we've also had a number of other groups who have participated in Juneteenth. And as a matter of fact, we do have one of our distinguished council members who's part of who's the executive director of the McLean County Museum of History. And the McLean County Museum of History, in collaboration with the Going to Normal Black History Project, worked on Juneteenth this year, but unfortunately it was over Zoom. So there's things like that I think need to be publicized and actually boosted in order for us to be able to have the kind of impact that we're looking to have. And I can also envision, we've talked about, we recently talked about the downtown, and I can envision some programming that will help to with the vibrancy of the downtown. And also,
I'm
everything
sorry,
through
you're
that.
actually at 5 minutes now. I have to kind
Oh,
of,
I am?
yeah.
Okay.
But
Well, I think I'm just I'm gonna stop there. But also I wanted to be able to give credit to one of my colleagues at ISU, Professor Toure Reed, who indulged me and educated me. He's a professor of African American history. He also
Of national
indulged me in
reputation,
educating me on the subject.
yeah. Toure, yeah, has a national reputation. It's maybe even international reputation. Thank you.
Yes.
At this point, I'm just going to go around some of you got your hands up. There's no point in having your hands up because I'm only going to one person at a time. I'm going to start with Alderman Matthey, and either yes, no, or you got a sentence or two. That's about it. So I'm going to start with Ward 1, Alderman Matthey.
Yes, absolutely supportive of the discussion. Have some questions on the actual implementation, and I approve that you dumped it all in Julie's lap.
Councilmember Boland.
Absolutely. I think it's a great idea, Mboka.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, Councilmember Mboka, I'm sure you're in favor of your own resolution. So I'm just going to make that assumption. Councilmember Emig.
Yes, I think it's timely and very, very well presented, Mboka. And I bring it on.
Awesome. Thank you. Councilmember Painter.
Absolutely. I think this is a great idea. I've been to Juneteenth celebrations in Austin, Texas before, and this is a great opportunity.
Great.
Thank you, Mboka.
Councilmember Carrillo.
Very supportive. Think this is great. I plan to submit an initiative around Columbus Day and replacing it with Indigenous Peoples Day. So if we're going to have staff look at the impact of holidays, I'd like for us to consider outside of this as well.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Let's see, Councilmember Black.
Approved.
Okay, Councilmember Craybill.
100% agree.
Councilmember Bray.
Yes, and thank you for bringing this forward in Boca.
Thank you, Mboka. Thank you very much. It's very important. And I think we've got a thumbs up all around there. Okay, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to our city manager and then we're going to adjourn. Mr. Gleason.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I've got a half dozen comments. I won't use my 5 minutes. Phil, if you would put the first screen on, I think it's reappointments. I'm sorry. 2 new hires this past month. One of these guys, the name might look familiar. Jonathan Cothe was hired as engineer in the Public Works Department, the Water Division. And then the next new hire is Ken Orris. He's a laborer with the Parks Division. And then Phil, if you would, yep, reappointments. Ryan Whitehouse, Connect Transit Board. And Deb Presley, Connect Transit Board as an appointment. Kelsey Harms as an appointment to the Citizens Beautification Committee. And Nikki Williams, the Zoning Board of Appeals as an appointment. Thank you, Phil. Next item, number 3. Just wanted to remind everyone that No Time to Relax Census 2020, that is extended through October 31st. So we still need to, just make sure that we get out, register, and even the clerk's comments earlier tonight talks about the impacts if we lose just a single head count regarding our census. Next item that I wanted to just share, that the city will continue to search for those responsible for the recent KKK flyers on Sunday, July 12th. I've publicly shared how critical it is to take a comprehensive investigative approach to finding who is at fault. To be clear, if there is any misunderstanding, I am not suggesting the local BLM chapter was involved. I appreciate the opportunity to clarify this. Dialogue is an important part of building community. As a community, we must continue to work together to make Bloomington an even greater community than it already is. Again, this type of behavior will not be tolerated here, and I will act within my power and authority to address incidents like this. The conversations regarding race and police relationships are important ones and crucial to keep top of mind. This is of the utmost importance to me. I appreciate the efforts of our police officers and community groups, which are all essential and whose partnership is invaluable. The next item is number 4, Farmers Market. This past Saturday's Farmers Market had 23 vendors and around 1,200 shoppers, down from a non-COVID year, but still great participation. Next item is bulk waste. The free pickup is completed. Statistics will be forthcoming to share at a later meeting. If they aren't wrapped up today, they're going to be wrapped up in the next day or two. Public Works crew, everybody saw the weather that they had to work in. They did an excellent job in extreme weather conditions and have quite a few compliments out of the community. So with that said, Mayor and Council, that's all I've got. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I very much appreciate that. At this point, do I have a motion to adjourn? Because we don't have any.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Craybill. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Bray. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 We are adjourned. Thank you all so much. Take care.